You're watching I-24 News. I'm Eli Roberts in Tel Aviv, and we are continuing to follow the Turkish elections with just 1 day left until Turks go to the polls. It could be the most important election in modern Turkish history. So the question is why? The answer is multifaceted. You have current President Tayyip Erdogan in power now for 16 years. Under his role, he's expanded presidential powers dramatically. We've seen him do away with the Prime Minister's office, take over the power to issue decrees, make a budget, even form a government. And things aren't looking up for the country economically. You have rising inflation and interest rates that are way out of line for doing business. So how does it all come together? We're going to get to it all in this broadcast. But first, let's go live to I-24's Middle East correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim, who is standing by in Istanbul. And Mohammed, first things first, talk about what's going on the streets around you right now.
Yes, it looks more like a carnival, a festival of some sort, but this is the last day of campaigning for the presidential advocate.
And we do have a technical problem that we are looking into right now. We will be back with Mohammed Al-Qasim, who is live in the streets of Istanbul in just a few minutes. But one of the big stories in Israel happening right now, of course, is the Turkish elections. And following the story from here in Tel Aviv, I-24 senior international affairs correspondent Owen Alterman. And Owen, these elections were supposed to happen next year, but instead they're happening right now. Why?
Well, Eli, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Turkish president, the longtime Turkish leader, saw an advantage at having early elections, so he brought them up to happen now. Again, this is a leader who, in the wake of the failed coup in Turkey a few years ago, has taken more and more power into his own hands. A lot of his opponents are behind bars, or those suspected of being his opponents are behind bars. He has control over the country's media in many respects and over the judiciary. So he really was at a point in time when he thought it was advantageous for him to bring up these elections. As you mentioned, and as we're about to hear more about, not quite sure if that bet will pay off.
And that is an interesting question, because I want to talk about opposition leader Mohammed Önce, because we did see tens of thousands of supporters, which really to a certain extent is unheard of for an opposition candidate in Turkey, turning out to a rally for Önce. Explain, what kind of a threat is he to Erdogan today?
Well, look, Eli, first of all, I think for those of us outside Turkey who don't necessarily follow the ins and outs of Turkish politics closely, this has come as a huge surprise. The conventional thinking has been that Erdogan is in control and in increasing control of the country. He's really the definition of modern Turkey, the most powerful and important Turkish leader since Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who founded the country in the wake of World War I and the ruins of the Ottoman Empire. So the idea that Erdogan can be credibly challenged with someone who can credibly threaten to beat him in an election or even to take him to a second round, I think is a huge surprise to a lot of people outside the country and is really, really quite interesting.
It is a surprise indeed, and we want to find out exactly what is happening on the ground in Istanbul right now. So let's go back to I-24's senior Middle East correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim, who is in Istanbul. Mohammed, one more time, describe for us what is going on in the streets around you.
Yes, Eli, let's take another shot at it. We are here located in the middle of the city of Istanbul, right at the Grand Bazaar, the old Egyptian market, where almost every single candidate running for election or party is here with a booth trying to persuade last undecided voters to go ahead and vote for them. It's going to be a crucial vote for Turkey. This is one of the most important votes in the last 15, maybe even more years here. President Erdogan seems to be leading in the polls. However, he is being very seriously challenged by a number of candidates, and there are a number of issues that they are running on it, from the economy to the Syrian refugees to security and terrorism. But President Erdogan, this time, it's not a given that he will be winning this race. In the past, he was able to persuade his base, to persuade the Turkish people that he is the one that enhanced the economy, that developed Turkey and brought it to be one of the most developed or top developed countries in the world. However, the economy has been hurting and suffering as of past, and that's why we see him and his party, the AKP, suffering a little bit at in the polls.
Yeah, and Mohammed, we can hear the theme song for Erdogan behind you, and it really looks like things are heating up where you are at right now. Give us a quick rundown of the 5 candidates who are on the ballot against Erdogan, and we're going to talk about Erdogan a lot more, so we can leave that for the future.
Okay, we'll start with Muharrem Ince. He's the top one. He was elected Republican People's Party, CHP, head a number of times in 2002, 2011, and 2015. He served 2 terms as CHP Parliamentary Group Deputy Chairman, and he is running right now as CHP presidential candidate, and he is definitely posing a threat to President Erdogan. Another candidate running for the president, that's Meral Akşener, which we've seen her in the past. She's the Iron Woman of Turkey, served as Minister of the Interior, was a Vice Speaker of Turkish Parliament, and led opposition in the Nationalist Movement Party, and she founded and leads the Good Party since 2017. Another candidate who is in prison right now is the Selahattin Demirtas. He's the head of the Kurdish Party, and he was a member of the Turkish Parliament since 2007. Co-led left-wing pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, the HDP. However, he has been in prison since November 2016. His accusation that he was inciting violence. However, he was never indicted. So those candidates, Eli, posing serious threat to President Erdogan, and this is the first time that we see a united opposition in the face of President Erdogan.
All right, Mohammed, stay with us because we have a lot more questions for you in Istanbul. I want to turn back to Owen Alterman here in studio, because you said that it was surprising to many on the outside that Erdogan doesn't have a complete grip on power in the country. And I'm curious about this. How free are the other 5 candidates to campaign in an environment where Erdogan is clearly the man who's in charge?
Well, Eli, look, Turkey, like a lot of other countries, has a sense of soft authoritarianism, meaning that the candidates are free to campaign, people are free to vote as they wish, but it's not seen as a level playing field. Think back to the Russian elections in March. I was there to cover it on the ground in Moscow. This looks a little bit similar. Why? Government media, for example, have given hundreds of hours of coverage to Erdogan, and the number of hours given to other candidates, at best in the dozens. It simply is not a level playing field in government media. Also, the judiciary is viewed as tilted in Mr. Erdogan's favor. There have been a few incidents of violence reported by the activists from Mr. Erdogan's Justice and Development, AK Party. So again, there are certain factors that make this election not really a level playing field, particularly that issue of access to media. And again, we heard from Mohammed, one of the candidates is in prison. He's campaigning from his jail cell. He's making campaign speeches by telling his lawyers and having them broadcast his messages.
And he could face 189 years behind bars if he's convicted on all of the charges made against him.
Right,
Erdogan
exactly.
Bringing up 39 charges.
And the fate of his party is critical because Turkey has a 10% threshold for a party to be able to win parliamentary seats. And we've seen it here in Israel as well, where the left threshold is much lower than 10%. That if, say, his party gets 9.5% of the votes, then their votes are equal to 0, and those votes are distributed to the other parties, so it makes a huge difference on what the vote totals of those other parties are. So there's really a lot at stake for that particular candidate, Mr. Demirtas from the Kurdish aligned party. And again, he's in prison. So there are a lot of factors of this election that make it different from elections in the Democratic West. That said, it's not a full autocracy. And again, because of the decline and the deterioration in the Turkish economy, we have seen candidates be able to make real challenges to Mr. Erdogan.
Owen, very quickly, so the numbers really aren't in favor of Erdogan when you consider that there are 6 candidates total running. So if the other candidates were not, or if Erdogan were not to get half of the vote, what would happen next?
What happens next is Turkey would go to a second-round runoff election. Again, Eli, a feature not uncommon in systems like this one. Again, look, the polls show that it may happen, that there may be a second round. Again, but we'll have to wait and see. But the fact that we're in this position, it can't be emphasized enough. I think 2 or 3 months ago, if you had told casual observers of the situation in Turkey about this, people would have been very, very surprised. Shows just how much of a difference that economic situation is making.
Yeah, and we have a lot to talk about on that front, so that is coming up later in the broadcast. But next on I-24 News, the elections in Turkey just a day away. Next up, what about Turkey's relationship with the rest of the world? Plus, how does Israel fit into all of this? It's one of our favorite issues to talk about, and we are going to bring it up. Stay tuned.
Fearless, timely, and always engaging. Every night, David Schuster brings the news from around the world to your front door. Watch Stateside, weeknights at 9 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News. He's second in line to the British throne, and for the first time ever, His Royal Highness the Duke of Cambridge will be visiting Israel and the region. We'll take you every step of the way, from Amman to Ramallah to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, as Prince William makes history on behalf of the royal family. Join us live for special coverage, only on I-24 News.
Welcome back. You're watching I-24 News as we continue to follow the upcoming Turkish elections. Turkey is at the forefront of nearly every issue in the Middle East, and frankly, a lot more. The reality is Turkey has leverage with so many countries. Take Russia, for example. Turkey's geography puts it in a place where it can shut down anything Russia wants to do by just cutting off Russia's access to the only warm water port the country has, which is on the Black Sea. But Turkey is warming up to Moscow and China, even Iran, and at the same time distancing itself from the United States and the rest of the West. We want to go live to Engin Baş, who is in Istanbul for us. And Engin, I want you to talk about the distance that is forming between the U.S. and Turkey, because both countries are NATO allies, and yet we're seeing Turkey and Russia get closer despite that alliance with the United States.
Yeah, well, Eli, it didn't come here. The relations between Turkey and U.S. didn't come here in one day, actually, especially during the Obama administration, the last terms of the Obama administration, when the Syria war was escalating, and especially about the Raqqa issue. U.S. Army and Obama administration picked up and allied with YPG, which sparked a big anger towards Erdogan administration, and this went deep and deep. And for more further, U.S. has pulled back its Patriot missiles, which was all along Turkey's border. This also made a lot of security concerns. So Turkey now thinks that they have to stall some air defense missile system because they feel fragile down there.
That's a really interesting point that you just brought up, because wasn't Russia very concerned with trying to get those missile batteries out of the region? And why would we see Turkey suddenly become closer to Russia if the U.S. were essentially caving to a Russian demand?
Well, it's a political game, and Erdogan actually is maybe playing, maybe putting a bridge between U.S. and Russia. So he's playing this card in order to keep his stable position in the international levels, and in order to put himself in a very secure way in the league of the top countries as well. Powerful countries as well.
And that leads me to my next question, which is that Erdogan does talk a hard game, but if he does win, is there a chance that he might try to restore that relationship with the U.S.? And is the division between the U.S. and Turkey something that was created for political posturing?
Yeah, definitely he is going to try for that, because he's aware now that the situation is not good in Turkey in the sense of economical issues. The economy is fragile right now in Turkey, and he is also sensing this. And but there was one update last week that Trump administration made one breakthrough. So now they are patrolling Manbij, Turkey and U.S. together, the U.S. forces together. So that's a good step for Erdogan and U.S. relations. Maybe he would like to use it as a first step, and then he may go further with the U.S. relations. But I definitely think that he wants to keep his good relations with Russia. He doesn't want to pick one over the other. But he feels, it's obvious that Mr. Erdogan feels that he needs U.S. support in every level after the elections. due to the, especially as we mentioned, that due to the economical fragility and maybe, like most of the people speaks out in Turkey, economical crisis is on its way.
All right, Engin, thank you so much for joining us, because people like you who are on the ground and know this issue intimately, it really adds a lot. Thank you for that perspective. And I want to turn now to Owen Alterman, our senior international affairs correspondent, and Ellie Hockenberg, our diplomatic correspondent. And Ellie, I want to start with you, because there are some who are saying that it's actually better for Israel if Erdogan does win. And that's because his opponents actually seem to be very much more critical of Israel than Erdogan has been so far.
Yes, and also, you know, it's a familiar enemy, so to speak, and to get a new one that appears to be more liberal or more secular might shake things further, because, again, it creates a different power struggle. But I do want you to pay attention to the fact that despite the recent crisis between Israel and Turkey, no one broke it all apart, because the Israeli ambassador in Turkey was asked to leave, but was not expelled and was not declared persona non grata. So everything is still intact. And this is why Erdogan also signed the rapprochement agreement a few years ago with Israel. So on the one hand, he wants to be portrayed as, a leader of the greater Islamic cause, wants to show that he has some clout over Jerusalem and, of course, to serve the Palestinian cause. But on the other hand, he's very much interested to maintain the connections with Israel, both when we're talking about the economic relations, which are very strong, even as we speak, and the relations are not in such a good state, and also diplomatically vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis Iran, etc. So we're seeing many ups and downs, mostly downs, when we're talking about the relationship between Turkey and Israel, but no one is breaking all the rules and creating...
But the business ties do remain strong.
And not only the business ties, but also, again, connections behind the scenes. And we hear harsh rhetoric, we hear inflammatory statements, but everything is still intact.
All right, and these are really some incredible images that we are taking a live look at right now. You can see this is Erdogan's main challenger, and look at all of those people who are turning out for him right now. So many people have assumed that Erdogan does have a tight grip on the country, but apparently there is an opposition there. You can see it just in the sheer numbers. And Owen, I want to talk more about what the opposition had to say on relations with Israel. But before I get to that with you, I want to listen to what someone on the opposition actually did have to say. So let's take a listen.
Of course, when we talk about establishing peace in the Middle East, we cannot exclude Israel, since Israel is also a part of this process. We have to carry out this peace process with diplomacy. All my life, I have witnessed blood and tears in the Middle East. Neither the Israeli people nor the Palestinian people deserve this. Especially the recent violent events at the Gaza border are very upsetting. It is not possible to accept them. In order to ensure that these events do not reoccur, I believe a new peace process should start with the participation of the US, the Middle East countries, Egypt, Israel, and the West. As for Turkey, we can make significant contributions to this peace process.
All right, and that is an advisor to current President Tayyip Erdogan. Owen, read the tea leaves, and specifically, why is it that Turkey is so critical of Israel in that statement, when at the same time they have their own problems on the Syrian border? But you know what, let's hold that question, because we are very short on time. It's an interesting topic. We're going to talk a lot more about that in just a minute. You're watching I-24 News.
Want my coffee, honey?
Roku Express. Now 500,000 movies and TV episodes? This is the ultimate streaming adventure.
Jack. Oh, great choice. Hey, where's my coffee?
Our world is becoming increasingly connected. 6.5 million Wi-Fi-enabled devices are now shipping every day, and global consumer internet traffic is growing exponentially. We are creating breakthrough technologies that connect millions of people and billions of devices. We're delivering robust, reliable Wi-Fi solutions that stream ultra-high-definition video flawlessly, and writing television's next chapter with solutions that make entertainment connected, immersive, and mobile. We are Eris, and we're powering your digital world.
As Turkey goes to the polls, I-24 News reports. On June 24th, the presidency plus 600 parliament seats hang in the balance. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan facing 5 challengers who want him gone. But do they have a chance? And Erdogan working to cement his control of the country for the future. A new law expanding his powers. Turkey at the crossroads and a new path for a Middle Eastern powerhouse. Results, news, analysis. Only on I-24 News.
Politics has its own set of rules. In Israel and beyond, public figures play an elaborate game of cat and mouse with the media. We'll break it all down for you with our all-star panel of movers and shakers.
The Spin Room with Ami Kaufman, Sunday to Thursday at 8:05 p.m. Eastern.
What you need to know, the news, fast and to the point, and the in-depth interviews that will keep you in your seat from the people that you trust. I-24 News presents The New Rundown. Co-hosted by Nurit Ben and Kalev Ben David. Only on I-24 News.
The Middle East, cradle of civilization, epicenter of the major crisis and conflicts that affect our world today. I-24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. As news happens where it happens. I-24 News. See beyond.
Welcome back. You're watching I-24 News as we watch the elections in Turkey. They're set to be held tomorrow. And we had a point that we were making just a bit earlier before the break, and that was about the relationship between Israel and Turkey, and specifically the way that Erdogan has been no stranger to call out Israel on the way that it's handled its problems on the Gaza border, yet he has his own problems on the border with Syria. I'm curious, what is your take about the relationship overall, and what does his attitude say about the relationship in general?
Well, Eli, just a couple quick points to round out the discussion we had earlier. Look, I think here in Israel there is a huge sense of frustration about the relationship with Turkey. People are fed up, and I think people feel that some of the concessions that Israel has made to Turkey are unjust, are even humiliating. But what's the problem? The problem is that Turkey is important to Israel for 2 reasons. Number one, that Eli mentioned before, the economics and the trade relationships, which through all of the ups and downs of the political relationships, should say mostly downs over the last 10 years, the trade relationship has remained strong. And Eli, number 2, Turkey is a strategically important country for Israel. I'll just give you a very basic way. Look at a map. If you fly from Tel Aviv to Russia, for example, you fly over Turkish airspace. At one point, the Turkish government gave a subtle threat that it would close its airspace to civilian Israeli aircraft. Imagine what that would do even to Israeli flights, and we've seen what difference that's made for Israeli flights to Asia over the Arab world, so it's important in that sense. And I have to say something else. This argument that it's better for Israel if Erdogan wins rather than the opposition, I seriously want to push back against that. It may be that on paper, the opposition has a more hostile stance toward Israel on one issue or another, but Recep Tayyip Erdogan has uniquely destroyed the Israeli-Turkish relationship through his use of the bully pulpit over the last 10 years. It was fertile ground. Turkish public opinion was never all that favorable to Israel, but he has uniquely took a hatchet to it, and he's an unpredictable personality, and I suspect Israeli decision makers will regret it very much if they want him to win.
That is very true. The relationship is far worse today. And one other thing that is far worse is the economic situation in Turkey. Since the beginning of the year, we have seen the Turkish lira drop by 20%. At the same time, inflation has been on the rise, interest rates rising 18%. All of this coming together in a really difficult situation for business owners to handle. Here's how former diplomat Mehmet Uçu put the situation.
We will have a similar stark choices to make for Turkey's foreign and security policy as well. Business as usual is not an option. Turkey has to make some intelligent and also self-interest-based decisions on how it's going to restructure relations with its traditional Western allies, or how it is going to align stronger and firmer with Russia, China, and Iran, whom have not performed well as Turkey expected. So it is important to recalibrate.
And let's go back to I-24 senior Middle East correspondent in Istanbul, Mohammed Al-Qasim. And Mohammed, one thing that we are hearing right now is that Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan may want to actually take over the ability to set interest rates in the country. Is that a signal that Turkey could possibly be going the way of China, of Russia, in a more controlled economy that we haven't really seen before?
Well, President Erdogan has been running and saying that he was the person who reinvented the modern Turkish economy. He wants soft control. He doesn't want, as he said, an entire control of or absolute control of the Turkish economy. And there has been clashes between him and the central bank and other economic leaders saying that he wants to assert his complete authority over it. But he has not said a whole lot after the latest move by the central bank when they increased the interest rate just a couple of weeks ago, in a sign maybe that he is being flexible. And the one thing, Eli, the one thing that helped President Erdogan and his party to stay in power for the last 15 years could be the one thing or one issue that will bring President Erdogan and his AKP party down, and that is the economy. President Erdogan relies heavily on voters from rural areas who depends on the agriculture sector, the farming, and also the religious conservative. And if those blue collars don't, if the economy doesn't pick up for them, then he will lose.
All right, Mohammed, we got to cut it there, but thank you so much for that fantastic reporting. We will be checking in with you later on in the day. And I want to take it back to you, Owen, because Turkey does have a big problem. It has a lot of loans from foreign lenders, and at the same time, you have inflation going up. Can Turkey manage to pay off its bills?
That's the big question. It's not such a great situation if your loans are in dollars and your currency is in free fall. And again, as Mohammed mentioned, we saw the rally behind him. That is a key risk factor for Recep Tayyip Erdogan going into these elections. As Mohammed said, his political strength was built on the strength of the Turkish economy through so much of his term, really an economic miracle. Now, anything but.
I wish we could talk about this for so much longer, but unfortunately the clock is ticking, and so too the clock is ticking until the elections begin in Turkey. They will be happening tomorrow. Stay tuned to I-24 News as we continue to follow this story throughout the day and all day tomorrow. Have a good day.